In today's video, we're diving into the 5 dumbest animal attacks ever caught on camera. From a drunkard who bet his friends he could pet a jaguar, to a teacher who thought tossing a banana to a silverback gorilla would make them friends. But first, we begin in Yellowstone National Park, where a man decided to bother an eating grizzly. It was June 18, 2016, and the air over Pelican Valley in Yellowstone carried a sharp, resinous scent from the lodgepole pines. Beyond them, a large shape hunched low over a carcass, ready to defend its kill from unwary visitors. Brian Cooper was a 29-year-old warehouse worker from Idaho Falls, known among his friends for his willingness to take dares without much hesitation. Born and raised in Pocatello, he'd grown up fishing with his father but had little experience in true backcountry conditions. The camping trip to Yellowstone with 2 longtime friends had been planned as a weekend escape, a mix of fishing, hiking, and getting off the grid. Those close to him described him as sociable, quick to make jokes, and rarely inclined to pass up a chance for a story he could retell later. They underestimated how much of a fool he would be that day. They had set up camp in the permitted backcountry zone northeast of Pelican Creek, carrying standard gear and a single canister of bear spray between them. The plan was a short hike out along a meadow trail that morning, keeping near the marked path before turning back for fishing later in the day. The weather was stable, clear skies, temperatures in the upper 60s. About 90 minutes into their hike, they spotted movement beyond a rise. Following the slope down, the 3 saw a grizzly bear bent over the body of a partially scavenged bison. The distance was roughly 150 feet, close enough to see the lift and fall of the bear's shoulders as it tore into the carcass. Grizzly bears can weigh up to 1,500 pounds and run at speeds of 35 miles per hour, faster than Olympic sprinters. Their massive paws are equipped with claws up to 4 inches long, capable of disemboweling prey with a single swipe. Their bite force of over 1,200 pounds per square inch is enough to crush a bowling ball. These aren't just impressive statistics. They're evolutionary adaptations that have made grizzlies the apex predators of the northern wilderness for millennia. The open meadows spread in a shallow basin between forested ridges. To their left, a narrow drainage cut a line toward the river. There was no wind shift, no cover-to-mask movement, just open grass. The bear was an adult male, by later estimates weighing 600 to 700 pounds. Grizzlies are apex omnivores, protective of food sources and documented to react aggressively when approached within 300 feet of a carcass. The posted warnings at the trailhead that week have been explicit. Avoid carcass sites, carry bear spray, and back away slowly if a bear is encountered. One of Brian's friends muttered that they should turn back, noting the animal's size and proximity. Brian stepped forward instead, phone in hand, holding it high and calling out toward the bear in an exaggerated, mocking tone. His friends called to him to stop, their voices low but urgent. He glanced back briefly, stupidly grinning, then continued. At about 60 feet, the bear stopped feeding and raised its head. The huff it gave was deep, short, and carried clearly across the grass. It lowered its head slightly, ears forward, a clear warning sign that Brian either didn't recognize or chose to ignore. Brian raised the phone again, angling it toward himself and the bear behind him. He had just shifted his weight forward when the grizzly lunged. The movement was immediate. One moment the bear was still, the next it was charging at full speed. It crossed the ground in less than 2 seconds, covering the distance with shocking velocity. The first impact hit Brian square in the chest, sending him backward into the grass with tremendous force. The bear's forepaws came down hard, pinning him to the ground. Its head lowered, delivering a series of devastating bites to his head and upper torso. The attack was brutal and efficient, each movement calculated to neutralize the perceived threat. His friends screamed and threw rocks from a distance. The attack lasted several seconds before the bear broke contact, turning back toward the carcass. Brian lay motionless in the trampled grass. One friend ran to him while the other fumbled for the bear spray, though the animal had already resumed feeding. Attempts to find a pulse failed immediately. Visible injuries included deep lacerations to the scalp, puncture wounds across the rib cage, and extensive crushing damage to the sternum. There were no defensive wounds on his arms, suggesting he had been unable to shield himself before the initial impact. The Rangers arrived within 40 minutes, having been alerted by another hiking party that heard the desperate shouts echoing across the valley. The carcass site was marked and later closed off for the remainder of the season. The grizzly was not tracked or removed, as officials decided it had behaved in a typical defensive manner when protecting its food source. Brian's funeral was held quietly in Pocatello the following week. Attendance was mostly family and close friends, with no media presence. The park installed additional bear activity signage at the Pelican Valley trailhead within the month, including explicit warnings against approaching wildlife for photographs. His phone was recovered from the grass about 10 feet from where he fell. The screen cracked, but the device still functional. The final image was blurred and chaotic, the frame half filled with his face and the brown arc of the bear's shoulder in the background. Yet even as Cooper's reckless pursuit of the perfect shot served as a lesson about stupidity, thousands of miles away in Brazil, a young man's drunken boast would lead him to climb into a jaguar's enclosure. It was September 14th, 2018, and the air in Manaus hung heavy with late afternoon heat. The municipal zoo's palm-lined entrance buzzed with the muffled hum of traffic, mixing with the sharp calls of caged parrots. As crowds thinned, a group of young men staggered toward the feline exhibits. Paulo Ferreira leaned against the railing, unaware of the foolish mistake he just made. Paulo was 22, born and raised in Manaus. Unemployed for nearly a year, he'd spent most of his time with a tight-knit circle from his neighborhood, passing hours between bars, pickup soccer games, and occasional fishing trips. Locals knew him for his impulsive streak, often framed as humor among friends, but bordering on reckless when alcohol was involved. He carried a reputation for stupid stunts to draw laughter or prove a point, often inviting someone to record the moment. That afternoon, he and 4 others had been drinking steadily since early lunch. By the time they reached the zoo, Paulo's movement had the loose coordination of intoxication, shoulders swaying, gestures drawn out. The idea began as a passing comment, one friend recalling a video of someone feeding a lion. Paulo raised the stakes immediately. He would touch a jaguar here, today, and collect 100 reais from whoever doubted him. His friends laughed at first, until he started walking toward the jaguar enclosure. Jaguars are the largest cats in the Americas, weighing up to 250 pounds and possessing the strongest bite force of any big cat. Their massive jaws can exert over 1,500 pounds per square inch, enough to crush turtle shells and pierce crocodile skulls. Unlike other big cats that kill by suffocation, jaguars deliver a crushing bite designed to pierce skull or shell, often killing prey instantly with a single devastating attack to the head or neck. The jaguar habitat was a dirt and grass pen, roughly half an acre, with scattered logs and a shallow pool. A waist-high public barrier kept the visitors at least 10 feet back from the inner chain-link fence. Inside, a single adult male jaguar lay half in shadow, tail curling lazily against the ground. The signage around the enclosure was direct. Danger. Do not cross barrier in Portuguese and English. Paulo glanced at the signs without slowing. Witnesses later recalled him stepping over the outer barrier in one motion. One friend raised the phone, the other shouting mixed encouragement and warning. From inside the enclosure, the jaguar lifted its head, its ears angled forward, body sinking low to the ground in a slow crouch. This was the classic hunting posture of an apex predator. Muscles coiled, weight shifted to the hindquarters, preparing for an explosive burst of speed. Paolo moved closer, closing the distance to within 8 feet, knees slightly bent as he leaned toward the chain link. His whistle cut through the enclosure, short and sharp. In a blur of movement, the cat surged forward with shocking speed. The initial contact was at Paolo's right leg. The jaguar's jaws clamped around his calf with bone-crushing force, momentum pulling him against the fence and then dragging him inward through the narrow gap at the gate's base, where keepers passed food trays. Paolo's scream was high and urgent, overlapping with shouts of onlookers. The animal released its grip on his leg, only to seize the back of his neck. The killing bite jaguars use to dispatch prey instantly. Its forepaws braced in the dirt as it began the violent shaking that would prove fatal. 2 zookeepers, alerted by the crowd's noise, ran to the scene. One carried a slab of meat from the nearby kitchen, waving it toward the cat in an attempt to draw its attention. The other shouted for the public to step back. Paolo's legs kicked once, then stilled. His shirt had pulled up toward his shoulders, revealing deep gashes along his side where the jaguar's claws had raked across his torso. The jaguar kept its jaws locked until one keeper managed to wedge the meat between its forelegs. The cat backed off a few paces, head low, watching as the keepers pulled Paolo away. The attack had lasted less than 30 seconds, but idiocy had taken its toll. Medical staff on site attempted resuscitation within minutes, but the injuries were too severe. The neck wounds had severed major vessels, and massive blood loss had occurred within minutes. The absence of a pulse was noted almost immediately. Authorities later confirmed death by cervical trauma and exsanguination. Police took statements and seized all recorded material as evidence. In their official statement, zoo authorities emphasized that the animal would not be euthanized, as the incident had been provoked, and the jaguar's behavior was consistent with its natural instincts. The zoo closed the jaguar exhibit for a week, adding a second row of steel bars in front of the visitor railing before reopening. Paolo's funeral in Manaus was closed casket, held 2 days later at a small chapel near his family's home. Attendance was limited to relatives and a few neighbors. His mother declined all interviews, her grief too profound for public consumption. Paolo's drunken wager with death served as a stark warning. But just 4 years earlier in South Africa, a British tourist's attempt to capture the perfect photograph would bring her face to face with a lioness. It was November 26, 2014. The day began warm and dry in Limpopo. At the entrance to the private safari park, guests queued for their guided drives, unaware that one of the resident lionesses would not remain a distant photo subject for long. Brenda Whitaker, 44, had arrived 2 days earlier from Manchester, England with her husband Alan. Both were seasoned travelers, having visited Egypt, India, and Kenya in recent years. Friends describe Brenda as bold, sometimes to the point of overconfidence, especially around wildlife. She liked to say she had a way with animals, citing memories of feeding stray cats in Marrakesh or getting close to elephants in Sri Lanka. What the sheer foolishness of Brenda's actions failed to account for was the reality of the apex predator she was about to face. African lions are among the most powerful big cats on Earth, with females weighing over 400 pounds and possessing 10 times the strength of an adult human. Their massive jaws can exert 650 pounds of pressure per square inch, enough to crush bone instantly. Most critically, lions are ambush predators with lightning-fast reflexes. capable of covering 20 feet in a single bound and reaching speeds of 50 miles per hour in short bursts. Their vehicle for the morning was a modified open-sided 4x4 with 3 rows of bench seating and a canvas canopy with a local guide in the driver's seat. From the outset, his instructions were clear. Remain seated, keep arms and cameras inside, and keep all windows closed. The animals are not tame, he reminded them, and they don't know you're just here for photos. The group entered the park just after 9. After 40 minutes, the guide turned toward a shallow valley known for its lion pride. A lioness lay stretched on the short grass, head resting on her forepaws. She was an adult in prime condition. The guide eased the vehicle to a stop about 20 feet away. Cameras lifted, shutters clicked. Brenda, seated along the left side, unbuckled and leaned toward the side panel. The driver cautioned her to stay back, but she reached for the manual window crank, rolling it down until nothing separated her from the open air. She raised her DSLR, tilting it for a clear line of sight. Witnesses in the back row reported that Brenda foolishly began making soft, high-pitched kissing sounds toward the lioness. The cat's head came up immediately, eyes narrowing, ears locking forward. These warning signs, the direct stare, the forward-facing ears, the sudden alertness, are part of a lion's natural communication system that precedes an attack. In the wild, these signals warn other animals of imminent danger, but humans often misinterpret them as curiosity rather than the predatory focus they actually represent. Brenda shifted her weight, leaning halfway out, lens trained directly on the animal. Alan told her to sit back. She replied that she was just getting a better shot. The lioness rose in one fluid movement. Her body stayed low, shoulders rippling under her coat, the short distance between them closing far faster than most people in the vehicle seemed to register. The first contact was the head thrust, her muzzle driving through the window space, followed instantly by jaws locking around Brenda's throat. Lions typically kill large prey by suffocation, clamping their powerful jaws around the throat and cutting off air supply. This technique, perfected over countless generations, ensures a quick kill that minimizes the predator's risk of injury from struggling prey. The force was enough to pull her upper body clear of the vehicle. Her feet braced against the floor in reflex. Alan grabbed his wife around the waist, pulling hard, but the lioness anchored her hindquarters, dragging backward. The tearing was audible, flesh, fabric, and tendon parting under the sustained bite pressure. Brenda made a choking sound that collapsed into silence within seconds. The guide shouted and fired a warning shot into the air. The lioness released only after 2 more backward tugs. Brenda slumped against Alan, blood running down her front. The vehicle turned sharply, accelerating toward the nearest ranger station. Another guest pressed a towel to the wound, but the bleeding was catastrophic. Minutes passed by, and by the time they reached the park clinic, she was unresponsive. A staff nurse pronounced death at 10:14 a.m. Park management called local police to take statements and secured the scene. The lioness was identified as one of the dominant females of the pride, known for avoiding vehicles unless provoked. Rangers emphasized that her behavior matched natural predatory reflex once the perceived boundary between human and habitat was crossed. She was not euthanized and continued to roam the reserve. Alan chose to have his wife cremated in South Africa. The process was handled quietly, without public memorial at the park, and her ashes were flown back to Manchester the following week. UK news outlets carried brief stories on the incident, often referencing similar attacks in other parks, but without publishing graphic details. The valley where the attack occurred remains part of the lion viewing route, but the guide who drove that morning has since left the park. Though Brenda's disregard for safety protocols became an example for a fatal predator encounter, far away in Uganda, a teacher's ignorant act of kindness would trigger the explosive rage of a 400-pound silverback. It was April 8, 2013, and the forest of Kibale National Park in Uganda hid more than just mist and birdsong. Beneath the dripping canopy, a silverback gorilla, the kind that can crush bone with a single bite, would, before the day was over, turn raw power against a human. Samuel Pride was a 31-year-old English teacher from Calgary, Canada, who had been volunteering at a rural school near Fort Portal for 6 months. He had come to Uganda seeking life experience before committing to graduate studies back home. Colleagues remembered him as energetic, humorous, and occasionally impulsive. When he learned that guided treks to see wild chimpanzees and habituated gorilla groups were offered in Kibale, he booked a spot immediately, eager to return with stories for his students. Mountain gorillas are among the strongest primates on Earth, with adult males weighing up to 440 pounds and possessing the strength of 10 adult humans. Their massive arms span 8 feet, and their bite force exceeds 1,300 pounds per square inch, enough to crush bone instantly. Despite being habituated to human presence, these animals retain all their wild instincts and territorial behavior. A silverback's charge can cover 25 feet in under 2 seconds, and their displays of dominance often involve life-threatening violence. That morning, Samuel joined 7 other visitors at the park headquarters. Their guide, a veteran tracker named Moses, gave the standard safety briefing about maintaining a minimum distance of 23 feet from gorillas, speaking in low voices, avoiding eye contact with silverbacks, and most importantly, never feeding or attempting to touch any wildlife. Moses explained that the feeding ban wasn't just about preventing aggression, but also stopping transmission of human diseases. Samuel nodded along and signed the waiver with the rest of the group, but later admitted to another visitor that he thought the rules were more for city tourists who panicked too easily. The trek began mid-morning. The forest floor was littered with half-chewed fruit and fresh dung, signs the gorillas were near. Within 40 minutes, the group encountered a small family unit resting in a dappled clearing. At its center sat the silverback, massive, barrel-chested, with sun glancing off the silvery gray fur across his back. He watched the group with deliberate stillness, his dark eyes calm but assessing. The trekkers formed a loose semicircle, cameras quietly clicking. Moses reminded them in a whisper to maintain their distance. Samuel stood toward the front, his daypack slung loosely over one shoulder. Then, in a move that could only be described as incredibly stupid, he unzipped his pack and pulled out a ripe banana, as if the explicit safety briefing minutes earlier had been optional background noise. While the others concentrated on photographing a juvenile climbing a nearby tree, Samuel seemed determined to ignore every warning he'd been given. One witness later recalled Samuel grinning before underhand tossing the fruit toward the silverback. It landed short, rolling once on the leaf litter. The reaction was instantaneous. The silverback surged forward in a low chest-forward charge, emitting a deep guttural roar. Most of the group instinctively backed away, but Samuel froze, his hands half raised in a futile gesture of surrender. The gorilla closed the distance in less than 2 seconds. With one massive arm, he seized Samuel by the upper arm, his grip crushing bone and muscle. In a single motion, he flung him to the ground as though tossing aside a branch. Before Samuel could rise, the silverback delivered a stamping blow to his chest. The silverback then sank his teeth into Samuel's left shoulder before dragging him several meters toward the undergrowth. His vocalizations were short, explosive grunts. warnings to the rest of the group to not interfere. Moses and the other ranger reacted by producing wild celery leaves, shaking them while making soft hooting sounds, a distraction technique sometimes effective with habituated gorillas. When the silverback hesitated, Moses threw the leaves to one side, creating space between the gorilla and Samuel. After a tense few seconds, the silverback released his grip and retreated toward the rest of his group, resuming his watchful stillness as though nothing had occurred. Samuel lay motionless, his shirt shredded, his shoulder bleeding heavily. His breathing was shallow, lips pale from blood loss. The nearest ranger station was nearly an hour's hike away, and there was no road access for vehicles in this part of the park. The group improvised a stretcher from branches and jackets, but within 20 minutes of the attack, Samuel lost consciousness from massive blood loss and internal trauma. Despite continuous pressure on his wounds during the desperate journey back, Samuel was pronounced dead by park medical staff upon arrival. The Ugandan Wildlife Authority conducted a brief internal review, concluding that the attack was a direct consequence of feeding behavior in violation of both briefing instructions and park policy. The silverback had acted within normal bounds of territorial defense when approached with unfamiliar food. Samuel's body was transported to Kampala for repatriation to Canada. His family declined interviews, requesting privacy. At the school where he had taught, local staff and students held a small memorial. The park chose not to issue a public press release, fearing that coverage of a fatal gorilla encounter could deter ecotourism, a major source of revenue for surrounding communities. The misguided attempt at friendship with a powerful primate ended in tragedy. Now, in the waters off Hawaii, a man's decision to ignore basic safety protocols would attract the attention of a relentless tiger shark. It was July 17, 2016. It began clear and hot over Oahu. The summer water temperature hovered near 80 degrees Fahrenheit, ideal for swimmers and divers, but also prime conditions for sharks, which often patrol the deeper edges of the reef during this time of year. Jason Tully was a 27-year-old handyman based in Honolulu, known among friends for being competent in the water but more of a recreational snorkeler than a seasoned hunter. That weekend, he agreed to join two friends, both experienced spearfishers, for an afternoon dive off the windward coast. The plan was casual: swim out from a small cove, take a few fish for dinner, and return before sunset. The men met at the beach around 1 p.m., rigging gear under the shade of ironwood trees. Jason borrowed a short spear gun from one of the others, along with a mesh catch bag meant for storing fish during the dive. As they checked equipment, one friend named Kaleo reminded Jason of a standard safety practice: keep your catch bag in the boat or float it well away from your body. Speared fish bleeding into the water act like a dinner bell for predators. Jason nodded, but minutes later, in an act of either stupidity or forgetfulness, he clipped the bag to his belt anyway. The first hour passed without incident. They moved along the outer edge of the reef, diving to 20 and 30 feet, surfacing between drops. Jason managed to land 2 small parrotfish, and later a larger goatfish. Blood seeped into the bag, trailing into the water as he swam. By the time they decided to turn back toward shore, his mesh sack was noticeably heavy, its contents still dripping. Kaleo warned him again, gesturing at the bag and telling him that was asking for trouble. Jason laughed it off, saying they were nearly done. However, Jason wasn't familiar with the predators in these waters. Tiger sharks are among the ocean's most dangerous predators, growing up to 18 feet long and weighing over 1,400 pounds. Their serrated teeth can slice through bone and cartilage with ease, while their powerful jaws exert crushing force. These apex predators possess an extraordinary sense of smell, capable of detecting blood in the water from miles away. It was 3:40 p.m. when the encounter happened. The three were in about 40 feet of water, sunlight still penetrating clearly. From below, rising from deeper blue into the paler reef zone, a large form appeared, moving with slow, deliberate sweeps of its tail. At first the friends thought it was a reef shark, common in the area. But as it came closer, its massive head and blunt snout became unmistakable. This was a tiger shark, easily 12 feet long, with the distinctive vertical stripes faintly visible along its flanks. The shark's path was direct, its head slightly angled toward Jason. The trail of fish blood in the water left no ambiguity about its target. Both friends shouted through their snorkels, motioning for Jason to drop the bag. Instead, he began thrashing his fins in an instinctive attempt to back away. The movement sealed his fate. The shark accelerated from a slow cruise to a sudden burst of speed, jaws opening. It struck broadside, clamping across his hips and lower abdomen. Jason was yanked downward, his spear gun spinning away as the shark carried him several feet below the surface. Kaleo dove after him, jabbing the shark's flank with the tip of his spear. The other friend did the same, striking at its gills. The shark released Jason, circling out of sight for only seconds before turning back. Its second strike was aimed higher, catching him across the midsection. This time it held on, twisting slightly before letting go and disappearing into deeper water. Jason floated motionless. The water around him was clouded with blood. His friends struggled to keep his head above water while swimming toward shore, but even with adrenaline driving them, the swim was slow. They reached the shallows nearly 15 minutes later, dragging him onto the sand. A local fisherman ran to call emergency services from his truck, but by the time paramedics arrived, Jason had no pulse and showed no signs of breathing. Efforts to resuscitate him on the beach failed, and he was pronounced dead at the scene. The Department of Land and Natural Resources dispatched officers to survey the area. A brief statement was issued the next morning, confirming that a fatal shark bite had occurred off Oahu's windward side, that the victim had been spearfishing, and that standard safety protocols were not followed. They advised divers to store catches away from the body and to be alert during late afternoon hours, when visibility changes and shark activity sometimes increases. Jason's funeral took place 4 days later at a small church in Honolulu. Fewer than 30 people attended, mostly relatives and close friends. His parents, who had flown in from the mainland, declined interviews. The service was short. The eulogy focused on his humor. Thanks for watching. If these stories of bad decisions leading to animal fatalities entertained you, click here for more videos.